Surveys are a great way to gather data for your research projects and can be relatively straightforward and cheap to do. This is especially the case now that surveys can be created, distributed and analysed online. Here at the University of Portsmouth, we can provide you with access to our recommended survey tool, which is Bristol Online Surveys. It's free for you to use, allows multiple questions, protects the respondent's anonymity and is fairly intuitive to use. This all sounds very easy so far, except there's a problem with using surveys for your research needs, and that problem is a poorly designed survey. I've looked at hundreds of proposed surveys from students over the years, and with the exception of a few, similar problems emerge in almost all of them. So the plan for today's short presentation on online surveys is to tackle some of those problems and to help you to create an online survey which is clear, precise, and actually asks the questions that you are seeking answers to. There are many important issues to consider before you get to the stage of designing your survey, such as sampling, population and coverage. I haven't got the space to talk about those today, but look at your relevant unit sites for more information on these issues. You should also ensure that you've considered carefully what the issues are to be investigated and that you're basing this on your thorough reading of the relevant literature. You can't start planning a survey about people's perceptions of sentencing leniency, for example, until you're fully aware of what the issues are with that particular topic. So, on to question design. What's wrong with this question?
What was the reason you last saw a doctor?
Whose doctor? A medical doctor? An academic doctor? You might have seen a doctor on the TV, at a party, in the street. This question suffers with a lack of clarity and doesn't offer any alternatives, although that's not necessarily essential. Let's try again.
What was the medical problem or reason for which you most recently went to your GP?
There's two choices there, a medical problem or a reason. Also, what time period does most recently cover? Memories are limited. It may have been years ago. What research shows is that our recall of GP attendance is around 4 weeks. So, here are 5 examples of types of questions to avoid. Number 1. Asking more than one question at a time.
Was the website clear and interesting?
Well, what if it was clear and not interesting? Number 2. Question and answer category mismatch.
Are you happy with the number of police officers patrolling in your area? A. Very satisfied. B. Satisfied. C. Dissatisfied. D. Very dissatisfied.
The problem here is that the question asked if you were happy and not whether you were satisfied. That's 2 different emotions. Number 3, questions that make assumptions.
What do you like best about your probation officer?
That presumes that you like something about your probation officer. You may not like anything about them at all. Number 4, double answer categories. This is a very common mistake and usually involves years served or age-related questions. For example,
how long have you served in your current role? 0 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 8 years, more than 8 years.
Now, if I've served for 2 years, then I fit in both the 0 to 2 years category and the 2 to 5 years category. Number 5, agree or disagree questions.
Do you agree that police officers are very hard working?
Firstly, that's a leading question, but secondly, we have to be aware that respondents are prone to acquiescence bias, which means people tend to agree regardless of views. A better way to phrase this would be, how far do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Police officers are very hard working, and then have a scale of agreement. So those are 5 types of questions to avoid. Now, I just mentioned there a scale of agreement, and it's to this area which I want to turn to next: frequency and scales. One of the thorny issues of survey design is how many categories to use as answer options. This especially concerns whether or not to use a middle category. So, for example, if you're asking how satisfied someone is with something, do you offer 3 options: satisfied, neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, and dissatisfied, or do you offer 4, 5 or more? Firstly, you need to make a conscious decision about whether to use a middle category or not. Middle categories tend to be don't know, no opinion, neither agree nor disagree, etc. Personally, I prefer not to give my respondents the option of a non-answer. However, there are occasions when you might expect your respondents to actually not know or to actually have no opinion. So you must decide this based upon your question and your knowledge of the topic area. Secondly, you must also allow enough choice, but not too much choice, so that you can understand the variety of opinions that people have. It's not enough to just have satisfied. You really need to know if it's very satisfied or simply satisfied. I would therefore suggest that you choose 4 or 6 categories if you're not using that middle option, or 5 or 7 categories if you are using the middle option. Longer scales do give better measurement, but are tougher for respondents, so bear that in mind. Thirdly, it's also really important that you fully label your scale. That means that each category needs a number or a name. I sometimes see a box containing numbers from 1 to 10 and I'm asked to indicate how much I agree with something. My interpretation of what 7 means in terms of agreement might be very different from someone else's interpretation of what 7 means. So you must fully label your scale. That way people know exactly what they're answering. Now this is an example of a poorly labelled scale, where the respondent would not be clear exactly what 1.5 or 6 actually means. What you can see now is an example of a much better labelled scale, where every potential box is given its own label, so you know exactly what you're ticking. So now that you know a bit more about question design, have a look at this question and see what you think might be wrong with it.
Please tell us what percentage of your day you spend on the internet. A, all of the time, 100%. B, almost all of the time, 90%. C, most of the time, 75%. D, half of the time, 50%. E, some of the time, 25%. F, only a little of the time, 10%. G, none at all, 0%.
So firstly, there's the ambiguity of day. Does that mean a working day or a weekend or either? Does that exclude night? And what time does night begin? Next up's the problem of recall. Remember what I said earlier about this being a problem? The addition of the word normally may help in this question. And the scale is also a bit problematic. There's quite a gap between 25% and 50%. So the general rule of thumb when measuring frequency is the following. First, if it's appropriate, obtain actual numbers. If not, go for number ranges. If not, go for approximate ranges, i.e. every day or once a week. And if that's not appropriate, go for vague quantifiers like often or rarely. And lastly, with this question about internet usage, what does spend actually mean? Is this actively online? What about watching something on a smart TV or listening to music online? Are all devices counted? Here's another one. What's wrong with this one?
Do you think you will continue to stay with your internet provider for the next 2 years, or would you say that you are very likely to look elsewhere? A, stay, B, move.
You probably spotted that there were 2 questions in this, which is very unhelpful to the respondent. They might consider looking elsewhere, but stay with their current provider. Secondly, this is a hypothetical question, so the results are not going to be that interesting, and the time frame is very long. Most people have no idea whether they'll be looking for a new internet provider next month, never mind in 2 years' time. It will probably be more interesting to discover the respondent's motivations in looking elsewhere. And lastly, what is very likely? Without comparison, this is quite difficult to gauge. So hopefully this will have given you some food for thought about how to better design survey questions. I also want to talk to you briefly about designing the survey online. Firstly, let's look at the beginning of your survey. The first page is often one that makes or breaks the survey. Make this welcome page, which is sometimes known as the splash page, visually appealing, with important information such as your statement of purpose, how long it will take to complete the survey, links to more information if necessary, ethical considerations, and how to start the survey. And be precise in your use of terminology. Confidentiality means that I know who you are, but I will not expose the information. Anonymity means that I don't know who you are. If you're asking for contact details at the end of the survey for more information or to request an interview, you cannot make a claim to anonymity. Next, let's consider the survey itself. Avoid complex instructions and keep things simple, but do make sure that all instructions are there for separate questions, e.g. tick all that apply. Use radio buttons, round ones for single choices, and use square boxes if you're asking respondents to provide multiple ticks. Now make the first question easy, interesting, closed and related to the topic. Don't make it about age or gender. It can be quite dull for respondents and off-putting. Avoid respondents having the scroll of death through too many questions on one page. Instead, have one per page. Save sensitive questions until nearer the end. You don't want to potentially alienate your respondent. Leave enough space so that they can answer open-ended questions or consider a small box which can grow. And then should you require an answer, Now, mandatory questions are difficult ethically. No questions should be required in a survey as it's a voluntary exercise, but sometimes respondents can miss questions by mistake. So consider an option for questions which is prefer not to answer. And lastly, pilot your survey. Piloting your survey has numerous benefits. It exposes your survey to new forms of thinking and understanding. It means you can evaluate the quality of the answers provided by the survey. This is really important. Do the answers you've been given help in the evaluation of your aim? If they don't, then you've probably been asking the wrong questions and you might need to reconsider your survey. The pilot also helps you to assess and revise the phrasing and content of the questions. And it'll also help you to explore issues of survey structure and question sequence. So this is just an introduction to survey design. I hope it's been useful. Do read more about surveys and questionnaires, and importantly, discuss your proposed questions with your supervisor before you go ahead. One last thing again, don't forget that the University of Portsmouth provides you with access to Bristol online surveys. In order to request access and for an account to be set up for you, please email your request to studentsurveys@port.ac.uk. That's student surveys, all one word, @port.ac.uk. Thank you.